bitten by something as small as poppy seed and your entire life changes. That's what happened to me. I was bitten by a tick, about 5 years ago now. I'll tell you my story. I used to do a lot of endurance training. I did mainly running, resistance training and weights. I was at school, I was a track and field athlete. And then when I grew up, I started to embark on longer distances. I think partly to keep my weight down, I think. When I started working, those distances just started to increase. And when I moved to the UK, I made it, and I got a lot more serious into running. I completed the London Marathon twice. And then in South Africa, I used to also do endurance walking or endurance hiking. The closest that I could find here to the same thing was the Lyme walk. The Lyme walk is a 40-mile walk that you do under 24 hours. We do it unsupported, and it's on the North Yorkshire moors. It was after that walk that I completed in 2010 that a few weeks after the walk I suddenly started to experience very strange symptoms. Not anything unexplainable, things that we get from time to time, but for me, who was very fit, I just sort of thought, well, this doesn't quite add up. One of the things was that when I would go for my run, and I used to do my long runs in Richmond Park, and I would do 20, 30 kilometers on a Saturday, I would get home and would not be able to do anything for 3-4 days after that. I would just completely be exhausted. The fatigue was most probably my biggest symptom that started quite early on. What did happen though was I started with stomach flu, which the doctor said, well, you know, we all get stomach flu. And I thought, yeah, well, you do, but you don't for 3 months though. As soon as that stopped, I started to get flu twice in a row within a 3-month period. By then I stopped training. I just became too ill every time I trained. I still functioned fine, but I couldn't train at all. So I completely stopped training back in 2010. When I then said to the doctor that, you know, I think that there's something more wrong, he said no, he doesn't think so. After about a year after the walk, he then diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. And he then decided that I had depression and gave me some antidepressants, which was fine. I had Lyme-induced depression, we just didn't know that at the time. Antidepressants doesn't work for that. A year and a half after the walk, which was now about December 2011, I lost my brain capacity completely. I had no ability to really have a conversation. I couldn't read. I couldn't recognize words anymore. So with the result that I had to stop working, I would look at spreadsheets, and I'm quite a spreadsheet worker. I work for an IT company. And I looked at it now, and it's spreadsheets that I've written myself, and I would look at it and think, what on earth is this? And my sister was there on a visit, and she says, well, shall I help you? And I was so embarrassed that I couldn't do this, that I sort of thought, you know, I should be able to do this, but I couldn't. I couldn't have conversations. Jeremy claimed that I stopped laughing at his jokes, which to him was a very bad thing.
Just didn't seem right.
But the doctor was still adamant that if I rested enough, I will get better. So I rested for 9 months, and I didn't get better. And this was now 2.5 years after the walk. And I experienced a very specific symptom. I experienced facial paralysis. My entire face just started to become paralyzed, especially the inside of my mouth and the inside of my eyes. And when that happened, I mean, Google has become my friend through all of this, and anything regarding chronic fatigue syndrome, I was an absolute expert by then. Even the doctor decided that I was an expert. And when I Googled it, Lyme disease kept on popping up. It was not something that I was familiar with. I mean, if I was, I would have taken better precaution on my walk. And when I looked at the areas where it was, North Yorkshire Moors was one of those areas, so I could trace back the timeline to very specifically to when I had my first symptoms. I went to the doctor and I said, well, do you think that it's possible that I could have contracted Lyme disease? And his words were, well, it's possible, but it's most probably not what it is. And that was the end of that. It took me 4 years, or almost 4 years, to get a formal diagnosis. I went back to South Africa last year in February and got a diagnosis of multiple intracellular bacterial infections. These were all brought on because Lyme does have the ability to then get dormant infections to come to the surface. And most of us have dormant infections in our body. So she then, this doctor is she's French but living in South Africa, and she then did the diagnosis and told me that yes, I am very ill, just in case I thought that I was just lazy and not ill. And she put me on a treatment protocol which consists of antibiotics, and it's cycled in 4-week cycles. But I am on daily treatment, but with different products or different medications. And I have just completed my 22nd cycle of my antibiotics. And I have 2 more to go, and I should finish my last one the first week in January. I can say that I started to show improvement, and I have returned to work in August this year for a few hours a day, for a few days a week. So I've been off work for almost 4 years. What is Lyme? Lyme is spread by a tick that has been infected by the Borrelia bacteria. They are passed to humans through a tick bite. There's a lot of debate about how it can be passed, but the only really known and researched method at the moment is through a tick bite. There are some theories that it can be through spider bites as well, but there's nothing to confirm and back that up. But definitely a tick bite. Now, you sort of think, when I think of a tick, and even when you handle ticks on your animals, on your dogs or your cats, just by touching that tick, you can transmit it. So be very careful to think that yes, it's only going to be a bite. They do warn you not to handle ticks with your hands as such, and if you have, to please make sure that you do wash your hands very well afterwards. We always think of something, I mean, if I thought of wanting to be bitten by something, I wanted it to be something quite substantial. I want to be able to see it and sort of say, well, there's a bite mark. Yes, of course, I deserve to get this. But that's not how it works, unfortunately. These ticks are as small as poppy seeds and as sesame seeds at certain stages. Now, you would often hear, oh, watch out in summertime. Summertime is not the only time you can contract this, because regardless of at what stage of the tick's life cycle, if he bites you or if it bites you, you can get Lyme disease. And you don't necessarily will get it, but the possibility is there. And if you think of a poppy seed, think of a poppy seed with 8 legs on. That's sort of how I sort of envisage it. One of the things that we suffer from now in the UK specifically is the fact that our winters have become so mild. So where in the past ticks and insects and things would be killed off during the winter period, that doesn't happen anymore. So you can contract this all year round now. Where is Lyme found? Now, we often, when we think of something like ticks, we think rural areas. That's not the case anymore. Richmond Park, Bushy Park, and don't think the doctors know, that the vets know more about this than the doctors actually do. But Richmond Park and Bushy Park, very definitely, they have deer, they have the ticks, and they have ticks that carries Borrelia. So all that I can say is, if you're in those areas, if your children are in those areas, be just very vigilant, because it can be a problem. And then, of course, rural areas. Any area where you will find sheep, deer, long grass, those are areas where you will find the ticks. What happens is that the ticks will come off the sheep or the deer, they will hook onto the long grass. You will come past unsuspectedly and they will latch onto you. Think of the size of that, you won't necessarily see it. So the best that you can do to avoid it is to stick to the footpaths and avoid long grass. The other one is to wear long sleeve tops, long sleeve bottoms. Now, I read that and I thought, the thing is that I was wearing my long sleeve running bottoms when I was doing my walk, and I was wearing a long sleeve top, and I still was bitten. We don't know, I didn't have any marks, but I definitely was bitten on that walk. The best to do is most probably to have an anti-tick pesticide and spray yourself with that. And if you Google DEET or anti-tick pesticide on Amazon, you will find a variety of products available that are normally DEET-based products. The symptoms to look out for, the one that's the most known is the bullseye rash. So that's or they call it the erythema. It's a very distinct red spot in the middle, followed by a round white circle, and that followed by red. And that's the epicenter, that's where you have been bitten. The problem is that not everybody has that. I didn't have that, which is why it took so long for anybody to figure out what was wrong with me. I mean, if I had that, I most probably would have gone up and looked to see. If I knew in which areas it was, I most probably would have sprayed myself with some pesticide. So that is the very first one. If you have that, go to your doctor, insist on antibiotics. He may not want to give it to you, absolutely insist on the antibiotics. The problem is when you start just with symptoms. Now, what I normally say there, if it's something that suddenly changes, where your entire health situation changes for no reason whatsoever, and these can be things like severe fatigue, and I mean, I talk honestly here about very severe fatigue. Insomnia is one of the other problems. Having flu-like symptoms. She's running out. Joint pains. I started very weirdly with joint pains literally just in my two little fingers. And I thought, oh, I'm getting arthritis. I also did at some point think that I get early onset Alzheimer's. None of those were the case. They were all brought on by the Borrelia. Headaches, especially headaches. And these are like a burning headache in your head. One of the signs for me was the fact that suddenly I just couldn't get out of bed. Brushing my teeth became the most exercise I did for a very long time. And it's just because you just don't have the energy. You suddenly sort of think, things that you normally would do every day becomes really hard work. You generally start to feel unwell. They call it the general feel of malaise. It's like you feel slightly under the weather, but you're not sure why. And then when the neurological problems comes in is when the depression, and it's a Lyme-induced depression, it's not a normal depression. Antidepressants doesn't work for this. So the depression starts, the brain fog, your dizziness starts. I had very weird electrical surges going through my body. So those kind of things will happen. And when that is out of the norm for a lot of people. And then the other one is hot flushes, and I'm not talking about menopausal or perimenopausal hot flushes here. This is waking up and your top is completely soaked through. Your body is fighting off something, you just don't know what that is yet. The best thing that you can do in an instance like that is to go and see your doctor, ask him for a standard set of blood tests, which they will do, to rule out anything that would be the norm. So thyroid problems, diabetes, anything that they can put a name to. If it comes back and they say to you, no, there's nothing wrong with you, and you still have those symptoms, I would insist on a blood test. Now, the problem is in the UK, the NHS will do a blood test called the ELISA test. It's an unreliable test. They do it, they know that it's unreliable, but because of the cost being a lot less than the other blood tests, that is the blood test that they do. And even if it comes back positive, your doctor may well say, well, it's not necessarily proof that you have this. The best thing you can do is to do what they call the Western blot. And the Western blot is a more comprehensive blood test. I wouldn't trust it being done in this country, but that's just me. I mean, I had mine done in South Africa. But a lot of people either go to America or to Germany to have that done. But it's well worth spending that bit of money to get that done privately. You will have to get it done privately unless you can convince your doctor to do it for you on the NHS. But get it done, because if that comes back positive, the chances are that you are positive. So what to do if you think you have the Lyme? with the bullseye rash, go to your doctor and ask them for their antibiotics and ask him to give you that. If it's symptoms, so what we call a clinical diagnosis, then I would suggest that you go the route, get the ELISA, get the Western blot, and only if your other blood test has come back normal and the doctor says, well, there's not really anything wrong with you. So in summary, all that I can say is the bullseye rash. That is the very first port of call. If you have that, then you know. If you have unexplained and new symptoms, that's not the norm for you. And this especially is important for children. If you had a child that's been very active, running around, and suddenly don't, this whole notion of, oh, eventually it was in my head, I was told. And I was, by apparently a very good specialist in the country, suggested a very good psychiatrist for me to help me with this. So ask for the antibiotics. Your doctor is not going to want to give it to you, but if you insist, they do. I have done that a few times, they definitely do. If you want more information, I've started writing a blog because I thought one has to do things when you get better. So my website is called JeanetteKruger.com. It is something like that. My husband wrote it out for me, so you can have a look at that. And my blog is called A Run, a Walk, and a Tick Bite Later. And I also have a Facebook page by the same name. Thank you.